What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. And hey, do you remember this format from way back in August? That's right, Tailgaters. We are getting on in to my college football playoff predictions. Now that it's in November, now that we sort of have a little bit of a better understanding of some of the contenders that are in this field and a lot of the top teams within conferences, and the playoff field is starting to take shape. The playoff conversation is starting to take shape. I figure now that we're in November, this is the perfect time to start throwing my hat into the ring of predicting what I think the 12-team college football playoff field is going to look like. And a disclaimer, this is not a bracketology video for the way things stand right now. I am going to sort of be projecting the rest of the season forward in the way that I see things playing out up to this point. And again, you can feel free to agree, disagree. This is just my personal, the way I project things out, the way, and some of the way things currently stand, what I've seen from teams so far, and the way I think teams are going to perform in the future. That's how the bracket is going to shape out here. So, hey, if you have not hit the subscribe button or rung the bell yet, and you're as big of a college football nerd as I am, then come on, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button down there, ring the bell so you know whenever I upload, and just thank you for helping support the channel in any way you can. If it's simply just by watching this video, then hey, I really appreciate you regardless, but you can also like, you can comment, you can share, and anything else you do to interact with the channel will help support what I do here on this platform on YouTube. But if you want to support me in any other ways, you want to see some of the other work I do within the sports media realm, go give me a follow on Twitter or X, whatever you prefer to call it, at TailgateNate29. Again, starting to get a pretty good idea of how I want to post stuff there on that platform. So again, I really appreciate all of you so much, and let us dive on in now. Let us start with the 4 conference champions. Who is going to be earning a top 4 seed, and who is getting that first round bye? Well, honestly, there are 2 conferences right now that I think are a little bit easier to predict than the other 2. A little bit easier to project forward. That's the ACC, and that is the Big 12, because, well, there's pretty very few teams there in that front running margin, and 2 teams particular in each of those conferences stand out. But the 2 more interesting ones are the Big 10 and the SEC. Now, the way I feel like the season is playing out and sort of the way that things are shaping up so far this season, I feel like the Big 10 is on track to earn that #1 overall seed, just because the SEC's had a lot of chaos. It's had a lot of parity, and there's still a ton of potential for upsets. If you haven't watched my takeaway video, I go through a little SEC doomsday scenario where every single team in that conference can have at least 2 losses, which is absolutely crazy to think that there really isn't that much that has to happen besides one upset to one specific team that would really have to happen, right? But let's go ahead and go through now. The Big 10 champ projecting forward, I think, is going to end up being the Ohio State Buckeyes. I just get this feeling that if Ohio State and Oregon were to meet again, I think Ohio State is going to have it. They're starting to figure a lot of their things out, specifically that offensive line. And if that combination on the offensive line works out the way that, it was able to work out in the game against Penn State, having Jackson at left tackle, having Hinsman at left guard, and they use that the way forward, and it's as effective as it was, I think Ohio State's going to win a rematch with Oregon. Now, obviously, Oregon can be in this #1 case here as well, because they can obviously win the Big Ten Conference, so can the Indiana Hoosiers. But projecting forward, the way I see it, I do think Ohio State will win the Big Ten, and the Big Ten champ, I think, is on track to earn that #1 overall seed. It's a crapshoot for who you're picking out of the SEC, but I'll go with the team that I think is the best right now. They were the highest in my top 25 rankings, and that is the Georgia Bulldogs. I think Georgia right now the best team in the SEC. Yeah, they had a flat performance against the Florida Gators, and Carson Beck has just not really been himself. You could throw Texas in there, heck, maybe Bama, LSU, A&M, one of those teams are able to get into Atlanta and be able to win the SEC. But right now, the way I'm projecting things forward, I think Georgia's going to find their rhythm. Still got some really tough games against Ole Miss as well as the Tennessee Volunteers. But at the end of the day, I do see Kirby Smart's group lifting the trophy. I know Beck has struggled, but if he can figure out the interception bug and play to his strength, Georgia is the best team in the SEC. Now, I said that the ACC and Big 12, a little bit of easier conferences to figure out, and, well, that's because I think this is pretty obvious. Miami, I have getting the #3 spot out of the ACC. Cam Ward will not let this team lose, and Miami continues to find ways to win. And then BYU is in firm control on top of the Big 12 right now. And honestly, at this point, if anyone besides the BYU Cougars wins the Big 12 conference, I would be kind of shocked. BYU's looked like the best team in the Big 12 for quite some time now, with Kansas State going down, with Iowa State losing, and with Colorado, I just don't think up to BYU's level. BYU is the clear and obvious choice to be in the college football playoff field at number 4. Okay, so now let's move on to the group of 5 champion, which I have right now getting that number 12 seed. However, it could prove that Boise State, the team that I have winning the group of 5, they could be a whole lot higher. Boise State could get the 10, they could get the 11, and to me, it would not be crazy if the Boise State Broncos end up getting a home field playoff game. More likely than not, they would have to earn that 8 seed in order to do it, and I think there are still a couple things that would have to happen for that to be the case. As things project out forward and as the rest of the nation sort of works itself out, I do think at the end of the day, at least as of me sitting here right now, I think Boise State is going to end up getting that 12 spot. So who meets them in the 5 seed? Where does Boise have to travel to? Well, a place they've already traveled before this year, Eugene, Oregon, to take on the Oregon Ducks. Dillon Gabriel looks like one of, if not the best quarterback in the nation right now. He's one of the Heisman frontrunners, up right there with Cam Ward, Travis Hunter, and a guy that, the Oregon Ducks would play again, in Ashton Jeanty. Boise State almost pulled off that upset against Oregon in week 2. Oregon has been a lot better of a team since that game. I don't know. I think that could be a very, very interesting game, especially that rematch. Ashton Jeanty going up against an Oregon defense that's been lights out so far this season. I mean, Oregon, again, I just have falling short. But if you have Oregon in that number 1 spot, which, again, I don't have an issue with up to this point, I would flip Ohio State and Oregon there if you indeed are someone that has Oregon winning the Big Ten Conference. But moving on here, the 6th seed, I got the Texas Longhorns. Quinn Ewers and company have had a couple down performances this year, but overall, that's one of the best teams in the country, one of the best teams in the SEC, and the way things are playing out right now, I have them taking that 6th seed, so not going to linger on them too much. Penn State is sitting here at number 7. Again, I don't see Penn State losing another game down the line, and I do think a home playoff game in Happy Valley is going to be in order here for the Penn State Nittany Lions. But man, Drew Aller and company are going to have to find some rhythm offensively. That defense is superb. Now, that Ohio State offensive front, the Patrick offensive front specifically on the left side, was able to bully them, but Penn State I have still sitting right here at number 7. I think Drew Aller and company, especially that Penn State defense, are good enough to still get into the college football playoff and to still have a home site game in Beaver Stadium, which I think is going to be a phenomenal atmosphere there. At number 8 for me, give me the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Again, this is me projecting outward. Tennessee, I have them ranked a little bit higher to me personally right now, but I do see Tennessee losing the game down the line. And obviously, if I have Georgia winning the SEC, well, then that means that I think Georgia's going to be able to beat the Tennessee Volunteers, who do come in at number 9. So you have the second matchup set. Again, Oregon and Boise State I have in that sort of rematch there. But Tennessee and Notre Dame, guys, I think that would be a very fascinating and fabulous game that I'll go ahead and predict here a little bit later as we will go through the entire bracket. But Tennessee right now, even with that loss to Georgia, I think are going to be able to do enough to get into the college football playoff. Now, if they lose to Georgia and then also lose to Vanderbilt, that's probably where they get eliminated from college football playoff contention. But Tennessee's been pretty impressive so far this season. I mean, yeah, you could probably say there have been a couple other teams that have been a little bit more impressive than Tennessee this season that, again, I haven't really announced so far. But Tennessee, to me, has done enough, even if they do lose to Georgia, a team that, especially if they eventually go on to win the SEC and get into the college football playoff, then yeah, well, I expect Tennessee to be right there at the number 9 ranking. Now, 9, 10, and 11 is where things get really interesting to talk about, because you're starting to talk about some 2-loss teams or some 1-loss teams that maybe don't quite have the resume to pad with some of the other teams here. So for number 10, I mean, I went ahead and went with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, obviously, if the LSU Tigers win that game, if LSU is going to be able to win that game in Death Valley this week, then you could replace that with LSU. Right now, the betting favorite is the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think they're around a field goal favorite to go on the road and win that one in Death Valley. But, I mean, when I take a look at at Bama overall. I mean, defensive issues, yes. There are some times where the offense doesn't show up, absolutely. But for the most part this season, they've been pretty darn impressive, and they have a win over the Georgia Bulldogs, especially if they go on to win the SEC. That's going to help Alabama's case a whole lot, and it's exactly why Alabama is in here at number 10. Now, number 11 for me was very, very interesting because to me, it came down to two teams. It came down to the SMU Mustangs and the team that I eventually put in here in the Indiana Hoosiers. Here's why I went with Indiana over SMU. When you compare the two teams' resumes, I really don't think it's close. I do think that SMU would be able to have that sort of favoritism over Indiana in terms of resumes, right? But the way things have shaped out in the nation so far this season and the way that both of those teams are playing, I really do like Indiana to get into the college football playoff. I think for the most part this season, they have passed the eye test a whole lot more than what the SMU Mustangs have done so far this season. Now, SMU is rolling with Kevin Jennings there, and especially if they go into the ACC championship game, and especially if they beat the Miami Hurricanes, well, they're going to get a top 4 seed, and then at that point, Miami would take over Indiana's spot and probably even be ranked a little bit higher, thusly bumping some teams down. But when I take a look at the SMU Mustangs as compared to the Indiana Hoosiers, SMU's only loss is going to end up being to the BYU Cougars and then potentially Miami in the ACC championship game. Couple spots that they need to be worried for. I mean, they got 3 teams that are all 4-4 left there on the schedule. Indiana, they don't really have a tough non-conference opponent. They did throttle Nebraska. They did throttle Washington, teams that potentially could make bowl games. They could throttle Michigan this week, a team that, again, could potentially make a bowl game. But Indiana's only loss then would be on the road to Ohio State, a team that I have number 1 in the country right now. So you just ultimately have to decide which loss is better. Is Indiana's loss to Ohio State better, or is SMU's loss to BYU better? I think ultimately Indiana's loss to Ohio State would be a little bit better, and I think they passed the overall eye test and have been more consistent so far this season, and I think there are some statistics that would like to back me up on that. Again, very, very close conversation, and I mean, who thought we would have a conversation about Indiana or SMU for the final spot in the college football playoff? But that's just the way that the world has shapen up to be in the college football landscape. So Indiana, to me, has earned that last spot to get into the college football playoff as we project things out forward. So now let's start predicting some games, and I'm not going to linger too much on this one, but we are going to start there at the bottom with Oregon and Boise State. I mean, Oregon has looked like the best team in the country so far. Ashton Genty, I'm sorry. Boise State probably keeps it close and competitive again, but Oregon is going to be able to roll there and move on in that one. We'll move over to the 6-11 matchup with Texas and Indiana. Hoosiers, it was a nice run. You're not going to compete with the likes of Quinn Ewers and some of the defensive talent that Texas has over there. Texas will be able to win that game. Hey, then you get to the 2 really interesting games, right? Bama and Penn State. This is a super interesting one to me, but with the way that Alabama's defensive issues have kind of hurt them this year, and I know Penn State does not necessarily have the speed on the outside to be able to take advantage of that, I do think that Penn State is going to be able to win that game. And I think the defense especially is going to help the Nittany Lions out a lot in that one. I do see Penn State beating Alabama if that matchup were to happen. And I think Penn State's going to move on in the college football playoff conversation. This one a coin toss for me, but I am going to go with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Nico and Tennessee's offensive struggles have really scared me. Now, I know Dylan Sampson's had a couple good games, and Nico just threw for over 200 yards, but they haven't hit the 30-point mark since they hit 71 against Kent State, I do believe, or Chattanooga, or whoever it was. No, Kent State. They hit 69 against Chattanooga, 51 against NC State, a team that hasn't proven to be that good this year, and then 71 against Kent State, and they haven't gone above 30 cents, and they've struggled in a lot of games so far this season. I mean, that's just the reality of playing in the SEC. Everybody's really, really good, but I like the way that Marcus Freeman's squad is playing, and I would have Notre Dame moving on. So really quickly here, the 4 best teams in the country, I think are going to be the 4 teams that settle into the top 4 here. I think Ohio State would beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I think Oregon, again, nice Cinderella story for BYU, winning the Big 12. I think Oregon would prove to outmuscle them. Miami, Cam Ward just continuing to find ways for this team to win. That is going to end up being a really close competitive game, but at their core, or sorry, I actually did skip one. I mean, again, Penn State's inability to be able to spread teams out there with their talented wide receiver group, which compared to some of the other teams in the country, they don't really have that great one of. Georgia will be able to win that one with their muscle. And the thing I was going to say is Quinn Ewers in Texas, I think, should be able to win that one there as well. So how about this? Potential Big Ten championship rematch and the potential third meeting between these two teams, and then Georgia and Texas, possible SEC championship rematch, and possible third time meeting this season as well. And I think the best two teams in the country at the beginning of this thing are going to be able to prevail. I think Ohio State, with all of their talent, if they meet Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, I think they're going to be able to win. And I think if they meet them in the college football playoff, Oregon and Ohio State pretty equal in talent level, but I think Ohio State, especially in a playoff feel, would be able to make that one more extra play to be able to get it done. And then Georgia, I think, would be able to beat Texas there in that game. My animations got flipped up. So you see my national championship pick down there as well. I'm still going to go with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I know they have not been super impressive so far this season, and there have probably been teams that have been a lot more impressive than what Ohio State has been, and there's a lot of questions about this team, but everybody that makes this bracket and anybody that makes this bracket is going to end up being a flawed team. Ohio State was my national championship pick at the beginning of the season, and with how wide open the race for the college football playoff national championship is this year, I really don't see anything that is really confirmed, but I also haven't really seen anything that's sort of changed the way I view the realm of the nation right now. So Ohio State, to me, is going to continue to be my national championship pick, at least as of right now, and this is the way that I currently see the college football playoff bracket shaping out. Again, you can have differing opinions of mine. That is completely fine, but this is the way that projecting forward, I think it is going to play out. We're going to learn a ton more about all of these teams and some of the teams on the outside looking in. Against LSU, could be on the outside looking in. Texas A&M, Ole Miss, SMU. There are a ton of teams that feel like they deserve it, maybe even a team like Clemson. Ton of teams that feel like they deserve to get into the college football playoff. Again, we'll see what the rankings look like tomorrow night. So, hey, thank you all so much for watching. Hey, remember to play hard but tailgate harder, and I will see you tomorrow where we'll do possibly, again, I'm not going to promise, but possibly a little bit of a reaction to the first ever college football playoff top 25 for 2024. And then we'll go ahead and start previewing some games. Preview predictions will hopefully start tomorrow. If not, they'll start on Wednesday. Lots of big games to break down. Again, remember to play hard, tailgate harder. See you in the next one. Goodbye.